everyone, Karen the Warp Spinster here. Thanks for joining me today. I'm truly glad that you're here. I want to do some more work with these half square triangle units. Have I mentioned that I've got an awful lot of these? So I want to do some more improvisational stuff with them, slicing and adding in strips, inserting things, and see where we go from here. I hope you will stay with me and help me to make decisions. I'm counting on your vibes. Come over and tell me what I might want to do with them. So I want to try something a little different today, and that is to spin these around a center square. This isn't exactly square, but you'll get my drift. Don't know what that stain is. So it's just putting everything around the square. In order to do that, though, I'm going to have to cut these in half. So let me do that, and I can cut them in half. These, I trimmed these, squared them up to 1.5 inches. So to cut them in half, I'll need to do 1 1/4. Doesn't really matter where I slice them because I'm not trying to be precise about this. This isn't precision piecing a block together. We are playing. Which does not mean to say we're going to be sloppy, mind you, but. So now I have 4 half square triangles that I have cut in half. So we have 1 1/4 by 2.5 inch strips. And I want to spin them around a center. But I have to have a specific size of center in order for all these pieces to fit. We're going to do what's called a partial seam. If you have not done one of those before, they're magic. I love partial seams. So we have to figure out what size this needs to be in order for this to spin around here evenly. Let me find something that's a little more square than that just for visualization here. This is not going to be the correct size, but it's also not going to be very square. So in order to do that, I'm going to start out with a partial seam here. I'm going to sew just part of that seam. I'll demonstrate that in a minute. And then this piece fits up against that. So this plus this with the seam here has to equal my 2.5 inch length. So if this is 1 1/4, we cut the 2.5 in half, so that's 1 1/4. And that plus this has to equal 2.5. I lose a 1/4 inch here to the seam, so this is effectively 1 inch. And then if this is 1 inch, then I need 1.5 inches over here in order for it to fit with this. But remember, I've also got a 1/4 inch seam here. So instead of 1.5, it's going to be 1 3/4 inch square. Let me see if I have something that looks like it might be. Oh, look at that. Hallelujah. There's a 1 1/4 inch square. I'm going to cut a couple of them actually because 1 3/4 inch square. Why did I say 1 1/4? 1 3/4 inches square. And then I'll set one of them aside because we're only doing 4 of these pieces at a time. Now, I've got all kinds of choices for how I can do this. I can be pretty random about it. That is quite random. So I've got 3 of these larger reddish pieces and just 1 of the other. I could do another one like that. I could make them symmetrical, so they create a block. That's not quite right, is it? So I don't know. That isn't the same, but, or I could just do it pretty randomly. So it could have that right next to the seam. It could, or to the center. It could have this part of it next to the center. I think I'm just going to do a random one. What will I do on this other one? There's one. See if I want to trade out some pieces between the two of them. That's a little more organized than I should be doing here, isn't it? Why start being organized now, you ask? And that is an excellent question. Yep, those are both fine. Doesn't matter. As I say, you could make it into more of a block, but closer to a traditional block where it's kind of symmetrical, but we aren't going to do that. Here we have, we're going to sew this seam first, part of this seam first. So we're going to have, I'll sew it to maybe about halfway, and then this is going to be flying in the wind for a while. Then I'm going to sew this piece on, which will mean I'll have this seam I can sew, and then that seam, and then I'll finish this one. So that's where we're headed. First off, I'm going to right sides together, 1/4 inch seam. You know the drill. Oops. I told you I was only going to sew about halfway, and then I did the whole thing. I did the final stitch. I thought, oh no, that's wrong. So I'm going to fix that. And I also did just a couple of back stitches here just so it holds while I work on the rest of it. And now I'm going to finger press that back, just up at that seam. And now it's all set for me to sew this one on. It's the correct length, which is good. It means that we did our math correctly. And I'm pressing, finger pressing, well, the first one I did wrong. I sewed it the wrong direction. And I'm going to fix it. Well, I didn't sew it the wrong direction. I pressed it the wrong direction. I wanted it to go toward the piece that I just sewed. So I'm going to fix that on this seam because I will not like it later on. It's creating some bulk there that I'm not wild about, but it's still going to be better later on. It doesn't really matter as long as you're consistent, but I'm going to want them to be pressed toward the outside strips. Where the trimming was set. There we go. Now we've got a point match there. Now that means I can put on the next one, and I could turn it if I wanted to. I don't think I do. I'll do it this way. And finger press that. Those points match. And now, because this, we left this half unsewn, now I can sew this one and it fits there. And then we just finish up that first seam and it's all together. Small pieces are quite fiddly, aren't they? You may have larger half square triangles than I do. And now this is ready to finish up that seam. I'm just going to match up the edges. I'll stitch up here and then I'll overstitch that by a couple stitches and do a back stitch. Let's make sure that seam doesn't pop open. All right, clearly a hurried press, and I can I will, of course, square this up and get all of these threads trimmed, but there is one. Now let's do the other one, and this time I shall endeavor to sew just half this seam to begin with. I'm going to do these with more of the white against there. All right, first one, half seam, half of the seam, Karen, just about half of the seam. You just don't want the seam to, the first part of the seam to be so short that you have trouble completing it. I'll try to remember to show you that when I get there. Since I didn't on the last one. Pressing toward this strip, and I'm going to just fast forward through these others because you know how I did the first set. Now I'm going to do my final seam, or finish this seam. If I had sewed just partly, even shorter seam to begin with when I did that first part of it, now as I try to sew back to catch that, it would be harder to get my presser foot and needle in there. So it's better to have it closer to here. It just has to be at least a 1/4 inch. I'd give it more than that. Sometimes you have a very long seam, you've got a larger piece. Just be sure to allow yourself some room to do that seam. I'm back, and here's the second one, which is quite a bit different from the first. I would then square these up and do a little better job of pressing on that one. And there we would have those two. Now, while I was gone, I also did a couple more of these, so you could get some other ideas for how they might look. This one looks more like a traditional block, and I like it, actually. There probably is a block that looks like that. Don't know what its names are. So we've got lots of different possibilities. I've got 4 here, and you know, we quilters like to slice things up and put them back together again. So here I am thinking I might cut these in, one of them in half again, to see what that looks like. If you compare these with these two pieces I did in previous videos, you can see that the pieces are quite a bit larger. What you see of this rusty red is quite a bit larger. And I think that's not a bad thing. When I put this together into a quilt, or a quilted piece anyway, I think it's good to have a difference in scale. Just as when you're doing a quilt with prints, it's nice to have, for most quilts, a difference in scale, so you have some small, medium, and large scale prints, at least for more traditional quilting anyway. So I think that will be good, but I also want to see what happens if I slice one of them in half again. Now, which one should I do? If I cut, and I have 2 choices, of course, whether I want to cut this way or that way. This one, let me do this one, I think, because it's quite symmetrical and I like it. Honestly, I like it. But it's not as much the same vibe as some of the others that I have here. It's a little too reasonable. And this is probably, what size is this? This is now 3 1/4, which means that I need to do 1 and, oh, I can't do fractions in my head very well. So it's going to be, I'm going to say probably 1 and 5/8. Is that right? 5/8, 10/8, yep, 1 and 5/8. So I'll slide it over to 1 and 5/8. And if it isn't exactly in half, of course, it doesn't matter. I'm just doing the halvesies thing here. I could slice it wherever I wanted to. And there we have it. Now, a couple of things I can do. Well, that's kind of fun, isn't it? I could flip it around and do that. I could put these two pieces together. Would still be symmetrical. See, I'm creating new blocks. I love this. Well, they may not be new. They're new to me. Let's put it that way. Or I can start sliding these around as I did. I'm liking that. I mean, it's still symmetrical. I don't know what I expected with a symmetrical block, how it was going to be asymmetrical when I don't know. I could do this with a filler in here, or I could add a strip here, or add put strips up here, and or I could cut them again asymmetrically. I'm going to kind of end up with symmetry no matter what I do if I cut them in half, of course. So perhaps the solution, all right, here's, no, that's not going to work either. Okay. Think what I want to do. Let's indecision. I'm going to slice them again. This may be a total bust. All right, here's the thing. If I cut this here, this is 1/4 inch from this seam and 1/4 inch from that seam. So I will lose that bit completely unless I insert a strip there. Let's see what happens. Make sure that's reasonably straight. And then this one I'm going to cut here. That one I cut right there. This one I'm going to cut up here. So we will lose some of that symmetry, and we're probably going to lose some of that point, but one thing that I can do, this looks like it's about 1/4 inch and I'm going to lose it. One thing I can do is do a skinny seam there. Not so skinny that it's going to come apart, but not the full 1/4 inch. Let's see what happens. Let me take a strip here. I think I'll want to use the same size strip for both of them, so it will be square in the end, which isn't completely critical, but that's what I'm going to do. We'll see how it goes. And I have enough room to do this one too, so I will stitch that one on next, just barely enough. Get them both out of the same strip so I know it's the same width. All right, now I can trim those. And when I'm trimming the edges here, I'm lining up the seam with one of the perpendicular lines on the ruler, just so those are straight. If I were doing true improv, I guess I wouldn't worry as much about that, but I am doing straight lines at this point. These two would go together, and these two, that one with the scant seam, or I could also swap these out. So I end up with a really long piece here, a shorter one here, maybe with a big long piece in the middle. I mean, there's just a ton of things I can do here, aren't there? What do we think? What do we think? I don't think I want those to go back together that way. They might, I might flip them around. All right, this is what I'm going to do. Now I'm going to, remember this is going to be a skimpy seam. Let's see if I can pull this off. Yeah, it's going to be a heck of a lot of bulk there. We'll try it. Sorry, I was muttering to myself over there. I think it's actually kind of cute that way. I was thinking it looked like an arrow, now it looks like a horse's head to me. So we put those two together like that. Do we want to do it like that? Yes. All right. And time flies when you're having fun. And there's the other piece. Now, one of them is going to have to be trimmed because this one, of course, is going to be a little shy because that's a scant seam. So I will sew these together and then I will trim it up. Still got some symmetry to it, but has a little touch of funkiness too. And turn any seams on that one. And of course, we're getting quite a lot of small seams going in there. Trim off that edge. Probably needs more squaring up, which I won't do on screen because you all know how to do that. And, oops. Ruler rock, ruler rock. And there's another block. Kind of symmetrical, kind of not. But I like it. And these are the 4 that we ended up doing today. What are we doing for favorites? I like them all for different reasons. I'm thinking I like this one. But I will forever see a horse's head in there. I like horses. Not one of those. I was not one of those girls who wanted a horse, but I like horses. Beautiful animals. There are our 4. This is, I think, my fave. Sorry, you guys. Love you still. And we could combine those. How would they look with these? I'm way ahead of myself, of course, because I'm not nearly ready to start putting these all together, but it's nice to have these larger blocks of color in there. I've been watching a lot of junk journaling videos of late, and some are more my style than others, but they all just fascinate me. I don't need one more hobby, but I love watching them. And one of the things that many of them do is to create an idea journal. So they build journals from scratch basically and use envelopes and do all kinds of decorations and ephemeras and journal cards and tucks, and it just fascinates me. Anyway, the idea book, they make a journal and then they get ideas from others or they create their own ideas, and then they make that journaling card or tag, whatever, pockets, and they put that in this idea journal to refer back to when they're doing future journals. Oh, I could do something like this. And in the journal, they can take notes about what sizes they used, etc., who the original idea came from, so they can go and watch the original videos if it wasn't their original idea. And this is kind of, I think, what I'm doing here with these blocks, with this quilt. I can look at different things that I did, and I could create a guide for myself, I guess, with just some hints about what I did in case I can't figure it out, though I think I could probably, so far, figure all these out better than I could remember what I did. But I might take a few brief notes on it. And if I decide I want to do a larger quilt, something in different colors, I could do different size half square triangles, couldn't I? Sort of like I'm doing with, pardon my arm, with this one where it's just willy-nilly, all different sizes. I like that too. I'm really into this fractured look, apparently. At least at the moment. That's it for today. At some point, I am going to, I wanted to mention a couple things. When I was pondering these two, and I had just those two, and Elle commented that I could turn them this way, which I think would be really cool, actually. I could see I had a wobbly ruler there, too. It reminds me, actually, quite a lot of my most recent pattern, High Rise. It just, that's not a hopeless plug, sorry. It really does remind me of High Rise, maybe because my brain's been on it while I worked on the pattern. So obviously I like that look. I think that's cool. And just about the same time I was thinking, I really want a pop of a different color in here somewhere. So as I'm putting these together, I might do thin strips of another accent color or maybe pieces here. And lo and behold, Elle said, hey, you could do. So we're on the same wavelength, Elle, apparently. And I've got a lot of fabric here I could use to audition, and this will be another day. But this is, I don't know if it was this exact orange, but pretty close to it, was the other color that I had in the Conga yoga quilt, which is where these half square triangles came from. And I like it okay. This is not a color I usually use. I don't know why I chose this. I just did for the color. That bugs me. While we're chatting, I'm going to fix that. But I think I would like to use a different color with this one, and I don't know what it's going to be yet. I've got lots of fabrics to audition. It's another day. We'll talk about it another day, just so you know that's coming up and on my mind, because it's probably on the minds of some others as well. That's it for today. Thanks again for dropping by. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you to my current subscribers. I appreciate it, and I appreciate all your kind comments that you've been making and your likes as well. Thanks a lot. I hope to see you next time. Be happy, be healthy, be quilting. Peace out.